Um, Hello, welcome to another video. I haven't done one for ages. One of my friends asked me to do a video to talk a bit about alien swarm mapping, or alien swarm reactive drop as it now is referred to. And really just to go through the steps of how I start a new map. Every now and again I come back to this game. I really love it. I don't know why. I just like the top-down view, the aliensy kind of feel to the whole thing. It's just got a really lovely vibe to it, and yeah, I come back to it quite regularly. So, well, every few years I come back and create something. So, it's another source game, of course, as usual. And so, how do I get started? And it's kind of similar to how I start with Left 4 Dead. So, I just want to talk through that process a little, and just make sure that just talk through how I go about it. So, first of all, what I want to do is for the most part, come up with like a theme or a feel to the campaign. Now, in this case, what I want to do, I'll jump into the game and show, is I want to do a campaign set in a heavy rainstorm like this. So, so what I've actually got here is I've started to actually build out some map or some of the first level. But I kind of want to go back and just talk through how I got to this point and what was involved in doing some of this and some of the technical aspects, but also some of the creative aspects you've got to think about. So, where to start? Okay, so one thing I wanted to do was really come up with an environment, first of all. So, how do I get a rainstorm right in the game? So, what I do is I create a small test map and I just start playing around with some of the environmental effects that I can. And the way I start that is I go and I look at the official maps from the game, and I play it, or just play some of those maps, and I find one which is close to or has some of the aspects of what I'm looking for. So in this case, what I was able to do was put together a small test map called water testing, and what I wanted to do was really just play around with rain and reflections and some of the particle effects and stuff like that, and just see what I could get away with. Some of these have fairly big performance hits, so I wanted to be careful and test out that as well and see what caused the game to drag more, things like that. So what I did was I put together this map here. Now, for all maps, for people starting out for a map, first of all, what you want to do is in one of the official maps, and this is in the way for some reason, there are a set of entities which kind of create the environment or the lighting and the look and the feel of the level. So what you need to do is go into one of the official maps, and you can find them in the SDK, and look for this kind of group of entities. So you've got light EMV, shadow control, light directional there. There should be a logic auto nearby, which is feeding into all of these and actually setting the input. So if we look at it, the outputs of this you can see are feeding into the tone map controller, and they're setting the auto exposure, and that just kind of gives your level the look of an official level. It's a strange thing to explain about why, if you just create a standard map without these, it looks different. But I just basically steal them out of the official maps, and then my maps always look a bit glossy and they've got a nice kind of look and feel to them. So yeah, try and grab those, group them, save them in a separate map somewhere, and you can just keep them and just reuse them over and over again. The only one you really need to mess with here, if you want to change the look and feel of your map, is the light EMV. And here what you're doing is you can pretty much leave everything alone, but you just need to change the colour sometimes. So maybe you want a map on a planet that looks purple or desert or sort of lava. You're basically messing with these two colours here to change them to be something. Now, because mine's a rainstorm, I've basically focused on a lighter grey for the brightness, and for the ambient I've given it a darker grey, and it really just kind of gives it that grey rainstorm feel. If I were to do something on a lava planet, I would probably pick something a little more like an orangey glow like that, but sort of heading more into the pastels. And then the other one here would probably stay within the greys, but maybe sort of mix it a little into an orangey field there. Sort of bring that up so you sort of a darker orange. Those are the kind of two tones that you're looking for, and you just have to play around with it until you get something you like. But just don't do any extreme colours here. Try and keep them fairly muted, and try and have one complement the other as a darker version of the other, and that should work for you. So overall, though, you can just copy those into your map, and then also the light directional, you want to change the colour of that a little to sort of fit with the tone of what you're looking for as well. So once you've got those done, you can just keep those, drop them into your map, and then play. I won't go through basic mapping creation, other than to say obviously your map has to be sealed with a funk brush, which should be structure seal, and if you want that these entities to actually cast light, you need to make sure that you've put a skybox in, skybox texture on the everything above the map. So obviously you're never going to see that. You might see it in the reflection of the puddles, so that's just something to be aware of. If you want to change the sky, the reflection that you're going to see, you can actually come here into map and then go into the map properties, and you can see there's an option here that says skybox texture, and if you come into here online, you can search for alien swarm skies, and that should bring up a list from the Valve developer community of available sky textures, and all you're doing is copying this one here, this string here, into that box. And then that's the reflective sky you're going to see in the puddles and things like that, and in the floor. But also it's this, if that just says sky black, then you're not going to get the light textures aren't going to work for you. Anyway, so this was the test map that I created. So if we look at this in game, what we can see is some of those effects coming together. So what I'll do is jump back and forth and explain them. So I do have some aliens in this one, so bear with me. Okay, so what we've got is a rainstorm. So first of all, to create the rainstorm, I actually pulled, there's a snowstorm in one of the maps. I think it's Dima Bridge, but basically that is a trigger brush, or it's a brush covered in the trigger texture. Funk participation is the entity. I just call it rain, doesn't matter, but you've got some options here under what type of precipitation. These particle rain ones are the really good looking storms. These are very old ones, rain, snow, ash and fall, but it says particle. That's where you're really going to get those impacts and things like that showing. So I've selected particle rainstorm, and then it's like, well, how much rain do you want? So you can select the density and also just the color, leave that alone. But yeah, so you can meddle with these and see and get an effect that you like. But as you can see, this is a particle rainstorm, so you can actually see the raindrops hitting the floor and things like that. But obviously in Alien Swarm it's great because they're dropping past the camera. So you get big raindrops at the top towards the camera, and then they get smaller as they fall away from you. So I really love that effect. And then two other effects I was looking at. One, I was playing around with some particle effects. So I found some of these water particle effects, which are really used, I think, in the game for leaking pipes and stuff like that. But you can use them so it kind of gives the effect of rain dropping off of some of these. And then finally, what I did was I found a water reflective texture, and I created some puddles. Now these are real-time reflections, you can see. I think this is water oil or something like that. I think it's called. It creates real-time reflections. I really like it. It's going to cost, though. It's going to slow the game down, I think, quite a bit. So we're going to have to see if we can get away with it. There are some liquid reflections which don't do real-time reflections, and this one does. So those ones would just reflect the geometry, like so this beam and stuff like that. And if you look into the puddle, you can actually see a reflection of the sky above. So that was the sky texture we picked. But yeah, so it's up to you. The way I did the puddle is basically you do a level of water, and you layer that exactly at the same level as the road, or you drop it ever so slightly, and then you change the road into a displacement, and then you just dip the road down a bit and create a a divot in the road that basically then allows the water to show through. It's a very expensive way of doing puddles, but we'll see if that's something. So I think I'll use it sparingly, but it's still a really cool effect that I was playing around with. And then looking here, you can see this is the road that I created. I've basically just create that as a thing, and then you go to displacement, create, and that should, and you just select OK, and select, I think it's 3 by 3, and then here you basically just say paint geometry, and you see you've got this tool, and you see it's got the down arrow, and then basically you just right click to go to create the divot in the road, and if I do that some more, you can see it creates more puddle in this respect. It sort of just helps the puddle to show through like that. So pretty simple, but overall when you combine them together, I think it's creating a really great effect for the look and feel for it. Anyway, so I played around with that for a few weeks until I got that right, until I was happy with it. And then once I was happy with that, I then moved on to actually starting to build out a real level, the beginnings of a first level. So in this case, I'm creating a map where we have a city that we're going to be breaking into, if you like. It's a sort of a dead, abandoned city, and that is going to start with a bridge like this. So what I've done is pull those elements out of my test map and brought them into here. So this is my rain brush. Once again, as you can see, it's much bigger in this case because we've got to cover the whole bridge, and basically I don't want anywhere where the camera is going to come away from the rain. But then basically I have just used a model or two models to create the bridge, created some basic shapes with texturing for the base, and then brought in and then sometimes I go into maps and I just grab geometry wholesale out of maps and just copy and paste it into mine. Here, because it's not really part of the playing surface, it's actually just background, this type of thing. Really, I just grab chunks of other visual maps and stuff like that I like, and then do that. But one thing I'm always trying to do is create depth and trying to create, it's not very interesting detail. There's a few containers and things like that down in the distance, but as we're playing along, if the player gets too close to this bit, they can see that there's sort of more world down below them and above. And then same here. And then we've got the dropship, which is just a model that is just playing an animation. It's got a spotlight on it, but for some reason that's not working. But essentially the spotlight would start by spotlighting the team when they begin, so it's quite nice to have that kind of dropship, as if it's just dropped them off. So that's something I want to get working. And then what I've done here on displacements, people were asking, if we look at the map here, you can see that basically this whole map is made up of cubes which are the same size. And so what I've done here is you can see this is what a cube looks like before I've done any displacement work on it. So basically I have, if I just destroy that, and I only need to select the faces that are going to show. So in this case it's going to be kind of the end of a cliff face, so I can select these three. So I hold control to create those three, create power of 3. That basically just gives me how detailed do I want my mesh for it to change. And then if I want to sort of make that rounded off, I can select subdivide, and that will round off the corner there, which is kind of alright. It sort of looks reasonably rocky or cliff-like. But alternatively, if I don't want to do that, I can actually just paint geometry and then go to my make my radius bigger. You can see that the arrow is facing away from me, so as what I can do is, if I click down, you can see that starts to drop that away. And then what I do is I bring the forward of that cube, the middle of that cube forwards a little, to create kind of a bulge, because if you look at cliff faces, it's generally they have bulges and recesses and things like that. And always bear in mind the camera angle. This is pretty much what the player's going to see, so they're going to see just kind of a bulging cliff a little bit there. You don't have to do a lot, you can keep it really simple. And then and so on. And so by doing that, essentially, if I come down here, you can see I've done that all the way along here. It's pretty straightforward. And once again, because of this is background detail, the player's never going to come down here. Also, what I've done is I've put a floor all the way across, and then I've basically just raised it around the base of the pillars here. And then the other thing I've done is I've actually used the blend function. So some of these textures that you're using have two textures, and you can sort of morph between them. So if we look at this, if I come up and I can click on Paint Alpha, which is our blend tool, and if I click, then you can see the other, I can make the other texture start to peek through. Or I can right click and then make the other texture start to peek through. So essentially the best thing to do though is, let's say here, because we're heading up to some geometry, I'm sort of creating just little lines that sort of lead the player's eye towards it, so that the top of the geometry is kind of fully changed colour, but you can see it's kind of got a gradient kind of feel around it, where I'm just kind of creating little lines. And because you've also got the lighting for the level, the weather and things like that, you can get away with a lot of sort of fairly scrappy work, and then in game it actually looks pretty good. So if we look at how that looks in game, let's just go back and take a look at it again. Obviously this is still early days, but what I've done is I've created some sort of strong shadows on the bridge, because I really like the bridge framework. This may piss players off because that could get in the way of visibility, but I don't know, I'll see whether I like it or not. But if you come in here, you can see that because of the fogging and things like that, it doesn't look too bad. It's pretty good, and it doesn't have to be massively detailed because it's way off in the distance, but yeah, it sort of sells the fact that there's a bigger world down there, I think. I may do a little more detailing and maybe add some sort of I kind of want it to be like a ravine full of trash, if you like. So but yeah, not bad. And then the other thing to note is if you want shadows that are quite strong on your level, so because I've got all this framework above, it seemed like a really good opportunity to do some really strong shadowing on the road. Now, by default, your shadows aren't going to be that powerful. They're going to look muddy and kind of crappy, so you need to just change some details of the surface where the shadows are going to fall. So what you can do is you can click on the surface where that shadow is going to fall, and then basically the default light map here is 16. You can reduce that to 8, and then basically when you do a full compile, you should get some really strong shadows. The lower the light map you go, the stronger, the clearer the shadows are going to be. Now, because these are fairly big shadows, I can, if I went right down to a light map of, I have no idea, like 2 or something, you might even see this kind of lattice shape and stuff like that appearing in the shadows. But for me, that's a bit much for this level. So, and also, it would take quite a lot longer to render. But yeah, you can play around with these things and see what you get. So for example, it might be a good idea for me to do a lower light map on these surfaces, so that this framework here creates a really nice shadow against it as well. But that's just something to think about for the future. Pretty much that's about all I want to share for the moment. Obviously you need to put in your 8 Marines to start with to get your game going. The other thing to note is, how do I get the storm sound going? That is a soundscape. So if you look at this, you can see it's got a bubble. Essentially it means that if the player starts within that bubble, they will hear this particular soundscape. Now soundscapes are covered differently. You can look up videos on how soundscapes work, but essentially they are blends of different sounds, sound files that come in and out, and they can cycle and things like that. So in this case, I've got some wind going on, I've got some rain, I've got, and all of those are kind of fading in and out within that soundscape. But later on, what I'll have is a soundscape perhaps of an indoor area. When the team come in and out of the rain, they'll walk into a different bubble, which has a different soundscape, which has maybe indoor corridor or something like that, and so you'll get sort of a nice whistling sound of some air and stuff like that coming through it, and maybe a low rumble, something like that. But yeah, soundscapes are great. They're really, really powerful and can create really great. I think once you put a soundscape into your level, suddenly it really comes to life. Like the audio really brings the world alive. So it fills in a lot of the gaps. Anyway, hope that's been helpful. That's kind of how I start these things. And let me know any questions or comments in the video. Thanks.